Hey everyone, my name is Deborah J, and I am an intrepid explorer of the mind, body, and soul. So, I actually run a service called Soul Navigation. And with Soul Navigation, essentially what I do is I use life path and career astrology to help women who feel stuck or they want to start a soul based business, but they're not sure what their niche is, what their strengths, their weaknesses are. Perhaps, they've done all the courses, all the workshops. They've tried to fix loads of aspects of themselves and they've still not gotten anywhere. And quite often, when I'm working with these women, a lot of what I'm teaching them or showing them really is the parts that they've been trying to fix about themselves is actually part of themselves. And the reason they can't fix it is because there's nothing broken about it. It's just part of who they are. And the broken part is really the perceptive or perception, should I say, about who they are, and not really being able to accept that because they had a preconceived different version of themselves that they've been molding and growing themselves into. And so when it comes to life purpose, life mission, life path, whatever it is you want to call it, the women that I work with, they've been searching for their purpose. They've been searching for their thing. They don't know, they can't put their finger on it. They know that it's within touching distance, but they just can't seem to make that step from the invisible to the visible. And this is a journey that I went on myself. It absolutely tortured me. And when I mean it, or when I say that, I really, really mean it. Like, it really, really tortured me. I knew that I had a higher purpose or a higher sense of some sort of a mission that I needed to be using my skills and talents on, but I just wasn't sure in what way was the best way to be using them. And through years of self-development and self-study, and look, we all turn our mess into our message. Essentially, what I came to realize was part of my mission is to help other people find their mission. You can't understand how absolutely frustrating that was, because in many ways, in my head, I knew this, but I was like, well, how can I teach other people to find their mission if I can't find my mission, and if my mission is finding my mission? So it was a bit of a catch 22. And now it's really, 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 really beautiful, because essentially what's happening is I'm using this life path career astrology to show women who they are. They already know who they are, but to kind of show them in a more black and white version, so they can drop away the fog, drop the baggage, see themselves more clearly, understand their strengths, their unique aspects, their quirks. Everybody has their quirks, and to see them as part of who they are, to stop seeing themselves through the eyes of the world and to start seeing themselves through their own eyes. And a lot of this work is really about reconnecting with our intuition. We spend lifetimes searching outside ourselves in workshops and courses and videos and books, and we search for the answer, when really, and it's really frustrating to hear this, the answer really is inside ourselves. And I remember hearing that and being like, where is the key? I don't know where the key is, and I don't know where the lock is. And how the heck can I find the answer inside myself when I don't even know what that means? And it's really, really frustrating, but it is true. And there is a way to it. I really thought that I was probably the most unfixable, broken human being on the planet, in that no matter what I did to change myself, no matter what I did to improve myself, it never seemed to work, or it didn't seem to stick or last for very long. And ultimately, I was back being stuck with myself, hating a version of myself that I didn't really like. And I really mean that, like really hating on myself, disliking myself as a person, and feeling really stuck with myself. And actually what it came back to was getting to know who I was, having compassion for that part of myself, and making friends with myself. That's really what it came back to. But in this, astrology was quite a significant part for me, because for me, I'm Virgo rising. I have I'm Virgo sun, I have Scorpio rising, I have an Aries moon, and I also have 12th house of Scorpio as well. So, and I always assumed, isn't your sun sign your sign? You know, that thing that you read at the back of a newspaper or a magazine, that zodiac sign that we read, isn't that who I am? And yes, it kind of is, but it's also not. There's such a bigger picture involved in it. And essentially, that's what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm just going to do a bit of a session I'm going to share my screen here, and I am going to show you a chart. It's just any chart. So it's just a kind of an example chart. And essentially what I want to do is I want to explain how astrology works. This is a very rough and basic overview as to what it is. It's basically giving you an insight into, you know, how I would work with my clients, and the reason that astrology is such a beautiful tool to help my clients get past that stuckness, that really just place of being stuck and confusion. They don't know themselves clearly. They don't know what their strengths and weaknesses are. They don't even know sometimes what their likes and dislikes are. And the things that they're, you know, coming across, the obstacles and challenges that they're meeting, they feel that they're doing something wrong in their life. When in actual fact, it can be quite often, it can be part of their chart. And when you look at the chart, it can actually tell you how to bring a resolution to that, which, to be honest with you, quite often is surrender. So I'm going to be doing more videos like this to go into a little bit more detail, because this is going to seem quite overwhelming. But essentially what you're looking at here is a natal chart. It's an astrological natal chart. On the outside, you'll see all these little glyphs. These glyphs are the zodiac signs, okay? So they're the ones that you've heard people talking about before, you know, Aries and Taurus and Cancer and all these different signs. So all these different signs have different characteristics and traits, which we're all very, very familiar with. Then you have all of your planets. So you've got the sun, you've got the moon, you've got Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, Mars, the North Node, which I'll discuss as well, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, and Chiron, which is another one I'll discuss as well. So all these different planets have different energies that they bring with them, and they express themselves in different ways. So depending on, you know, their placements will depend on how they act through a particular zodiac sign, for argument's sake. And then what we have here, like these spokes of a wheel that you see, are the 12 houses. So what does that mean? So from 1 all the way around to 12, which I'm going to explain just now in a moment, essentially are the different aspects and areas of our life. Okay. And the way I kind of like to look at it, and this is my own understanding and expression of astrology in terms of how I like to convey it, because this is for me how it makes more sense. But essentially, I kind of see these 12 houses as developmental stages in our life. And depending on, you know, you'll see some houses have no planets in them and some houses have planets in them. Every house will have a sign around the outside, but not every house on the inside here will have a placement of a planet. Now, that doesn't mean there's nothing going on in that house. It just means that in this lifetime, your focus really is where the planets are. And they will actually tell you the different areas that you need to look at in your particular lifetime. So this is a lot of information. It's really just bringing you on a guided tour of the zodiac natal chart, or sorry, the astrological natal chart and how it works. And as I said, we can discuss in more videos you know, the other things that we need to look at in terms of life path and career astrology as well. So when we look at this, we can see this is the first house here. This dark line coming across here is the ascendant. The ascendant, or the rising sign here, is Gemini. So essentially the ascendant, or the rising sign, is the sign that essentially was on the east side of the horizon the moment that you were born. So if you can imagine this to be like the ground, okay? What's here is below the ground. What's here is above the ground. And if you were standing here and this was east as you're standing there, and this was west as you're standing there. So it's the opposite to what we know on if you're looking at a map. But if you're standing, this would be east and then this would be west. That's essentially showing you what came up over the horizon the moment that you were born, and all across, until the end of the day when the sun would disappear down the other side of the horizon. Okay. So in this particular chart, the moon is over at the top section of the natal chart, which means that this person was born in the nighttime or in the evening time or very early morning. Okay. But essentially your rising sign is the sign that it's the lenses that you wear when you're looking in the world, and it's how the world sees you. It's kind of more about who you are in the eyes of the world. So it's a lot about the traits that you will have. So for argument's sake, this person, while their sun, you can see this is actually the glyph for the sun. The sun is in Cancer. So this person is a Cancerian in terms of their sun sign, but actually quite a lot of their personal characteristics and traits will be Gemini. So equally, it would be said if this was Gemini and their sun was over here in Aquarius or something, it would mean that their sun sign will be Aquarius, but their rising sign is Gemini, which means actually they display very Gemini type characteristics. And I will go into all the characteristics of the various different signs and the different planets and the different houses at a later stage. Today, I'm just going to focus more so on the houses to bring you on the journey. So the rising sign is important because this is how you came into the world. It's essentially the past lives that you've brought with you and the energy from those. It's also, it can tell a lot about your childhood, and it can actually tell you quite a lot about your parents and what your parents were like with you, or how they treated you as a child as well, or how you were seen by your parents. In this case with Gemini is, and not to get into it too much, but Geminis are really, really chatty. They're very quick-witted. They're very, very smart. They're very, very intelligent. They will have thought, really far ahead about what they're going to say. They love bite-sized nuggets of information. They love spontaneity and variety. But because there's such a Gemini is an air sign, and it's all about the intellect and communication. It's all up here. And with an air sign being specifically like Gemini being so kind of very fast-minded, quite often as kids, their emotional needs were maybe not always fully met. And that could be just because they were such chatty little kids. They could have been the comedians, the ones on the soapbox, going, doing the party piece and whatever. And so when a child is very verbal, they tend to be met with appreciation for their verbal aspects. And it's not known that they need emotional comfort and support as well. So quite often Geminis will be all chat because they feel very vulnerable with their emotions, because they're not really sure how to communicate their emotions very well. And so as kids, you'll find that Gemini's parents, they may have felt overlooked and not understood emotionally by their parents. That's how they felt, because they just felt that part of them wasn't necessarily nourished as much. And then they grow up to mask that insecurity about their emotional vulnerability with chatter. Now, Geminis are life and soul of the party. And if you want to throw a party and you want somebody there to really make sure it's going to be a fun time, they're Geminis. That's who you want at your party. So this essentially is just really to explain that while, yes, we are our sun sign and it's really important for us, actually your rising sign is equally, in my eyes, when I'm doing astrology, I find that a lot of people resonate very, very strongly with their rising sign. And if you want to know, if you're curious and you're interested and you want to know what's your rising sign, what's your moon, what's your sun, then drop me an email at deborahjanekelly.com, or go to deborahjkelly.com, and you can send me a message or email me at deborahjanekelly, DeborahJanekelly at gmail.com, and just request a chart from me if you want to know what your rising, sun, moon sign, etc. is, and I can tell you all that. So that's essentially just the start of it. To add more chaos and confusion, we have our sun sign, our rising sign, but actually another really important aspect of our personality is our moon sign. And the moon sign is all about our emotions, our subconscious, the feelings that are hidden. If you can imagine, the moon changes its sign every 2-3 days. So when it's moving around the chart, it's hitting all these different zodiac signs, it's hitting all these different houses, and if the intensity and it fluctuates, and it's a bit like, you know, there's a new moon and there's a full moon and there's a waning and a waxing moon, and there's all these different changes of the moon, and the moon pulls in and out the tide. You have this kind of tidal effect as well. And our emotions change on the hour, they change every day. You know, if you're in a good mood today, you can't be guaranteed that you're going to be a good mood tomorrow. So essentially, the moon is always changing. It's one of the fastest, we consider it a planet. So it's one of the fastest planets that moves around. And because it changes and in all these different elements and signs and houses so often, you can see why our emotions change a lot. Now, when the chart is, when this moon is in the top part of the chart, it would mean that for this particular person, their moon sign would be not more important than their sun sign, but it would have more potency for them than their sun sign. So your position of your moon and what house it's in and what sign it's in will indicate where you feel most emotionally secure in your life. So where somebody might have a moon in an earth sign, or a moon in a water sign, or a moon in an air or fire sign, and depending on which sign it is, it'll actually tell you, you know, what their emotions are like. It will also tell you, depending on the house that they're in, the area of life that they feel most secure. So what I'm going to do when I'm talking about houses, I'm sure those of you who don't know a huge amount about astrology are probably like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So the houses are these sections here, as I said, these spokes that go around, and these segments. There's 12 of them. So in the first house, and I'm going to kind of blast through these and I can go through it again, but the first house is the house of self. It's me, I. It's the physical body. It is who you are as a person in the world. It is, you can actually tell a lot of characteristics of a person as well by the first house, but it's essentially the house of self. So it's everything to do with you personally. Nobody else is involved in this house except yourself. And as I said, it can be to do with your body as well. The second house is to do with money, values, possessions. In terms of when we're working with life path and career astrology, it is one of the houses that we look at in terms of your skills and talents, and also, you know, how you make money. Or it's really also to do with stability and structure. So the possessions in this world, or, you know, what you need in this world to feel supported and to feel secure. So if you can imagine, if the ascendant here is when we were born, the next phase then is all about me, I. Like babies are just, babies are so selfish because they need to be. They don't know any different. They only know themselves, and it's all about survival. So they're very much, you know, they're in the first house. Then, you know, you get a little bit older, you move into money, you discover money and how money can give you security, or how possessions, whether it's toys or cars, whatever it is, as we go through life, our possessions quite often is how we define ourselves. And again, this will depend on the sign that you are and your predominant polarities and all the rest of it. But essentially the second house is to do with money, possessions, values, skills, that which you value in life. It doesn't have to be a physical thing, but it can be your values in terms of how you see the world, and money as well. The third house is all to do with communication. It's to do with your siblings also, and it is to do with short-term travel. So, you know, going to the shop, going to the bank, anywhere in your kind of local community, short trips. It's kind of, it's not your big holidays, and it's not going very far. It's kind of like your everyday kind of short trips that you would take. And it's also about education to some extent as well. So here, when we're talking about education, we're more talking about kind of like primary, secondary school, kind of more local school level than it is kind of further away. The fourth house is the house of the fourth house is the house of family. Sorry, I was about to sneeze there. The house, it's your home. It is used to be to do with your father. Nowadays it's mother, but it can be either or both. So depending on the family situation, it can talk about mother or father. I've seen it being both actually. So essentially you're talking about your home life, where you get your emotional security from, or what your emotional security is like in your home life. It's also about real estate or property as well. Your fifth house is all to do with fun, games, sex. It's to do with gambling and addiction. It's to do with the kind of lighter and fun side of life, but with everything there's a polarity. So fun and games can also be gambling. It can be addiction as well. And in terms of, it's to do with children. So actually, for those of you who have children, you'll actually be able to see them quite often in your fifth house. Or if you want to have an idea what your kids are going to be like when you get older, when you do have kids, then you're going to see what they're predominantly going to be like through your fifth house. It's also the house of sex. So it's not the house of long-term partners, but it's to do with, you know, those rendezvous or sex itself, the fun aspect. And then we have the sixth house. The sixth house is the house of work and service to others. It's health, and it's anything that's kind of health related would be your sixth house, or, you know, would be more clearly defined by your sixth house. But it's also to do with your daily routine and work. So again, when we're looking at career life path astrology, we're looking at the sixth house in terms of, you know, what do you need on a daily basis in the job that you're in the work that you're in order to be able to feel secure, safe, contented, happy. Some people need, some people need structure, routine, very little change, and need it to be very consistent and not very varied. Other signs will need total variation. They will move from job to job. They need to be innovative, creative. It depends on the sign and the planets that are in that particular house. So if you can see, the first 6 houses are very much to do with you're born, you go through the world, learn about money, learn about kind of education, your siblings and family and home life. Then you start, looking at your working world and health. And then we're into the second half of the zodiac, or not the zodiac, the natal chart. And really this starts to get into other people. It's not about you anymore. It's about other people and how they show up in your life and what challenges and joys they bring, and areas that you may or may not need to work on, how you're going to show up in the world, how you're going to give back. So we start with the 7th house, and the 7th house is your one-to-one relationships. So you're talking about romantic relationships, long-term partnership, marriage. It's to do with contracts. So again, you can see in terms of marriage, a marriage is a contract. It's also to do with business partnerships. It is to do with legalities. It is to do with open enemies also. So there's quite a lot going on in this house, and it's usually kind of a one-on-one thing that's happening. So then we go into the 8th house, and I know not a lot of people like the 8th house, but because I'm Scorpio rising, there's a little bit of an affinity and similarities in the 8th house, which is probably why I quite like it. I tend to like the underdog anyway. So the 8th house is the house of transformation. It is the house of life, death, and rebirth. It is a hidden house. It's hidden from the ascendant. The ascendant can't really see it in terms of aspects. So, and it's also the house of other people's money and other people's finances. It is a house of inheritance. So with life, death, and rebirth, transformation, even down to the occult to some extent, and also to do with kind of taboo subjects or things that are hidden, the kind of the truths in the world that are hidden, everything like that comes from the 8th house. So it's quite a dark and mysterious house. Then we moved on to the 9th house. The 9th house is the house of higher learnings. It is all about kind of wisdom, philosophy, religious organizations, long distance travel as well. So if you look, you'll actually see that the 9th house is opposite the 3rd house. And if you remember, I said the 3rd house is all about short trips. Well, the 9th house is about long distance travel. So you're talking about going on holidays, traveling around the world, going to places that are far away. We are talking here about communication. In terms of the ninth house, it's about kind of higher learnings and communication. So you're talking about your kind of spiritual gurus and your spiritual teachers and kind of religious organizations and these big, big mind philosophies. And it's about communicating those big mind philosophies. It's also the house of publishing as well. So you'll actually see when you look at the opposite houses, you'll see that there's a little bit of polarity going on between them as well. The 10th house is the house of career. So this is the highest point. You'll see that the line is a bit darker here. It's called the midhaven or midheaven. Essentially, this is the highest point in your chart, and it's all to do with how you're seen in the public eye. It is to do with structures, organizations, institutions, that which has boundaries, and very much to do with your career and who you are going to become in the eyes of the world. I kind of liken it to, if there's any part of your chart that you're going to stand there naked and have a whole room looking at you, it's going to be that one. So when it comes to career, quite often, and I'll do another video on this, when we're working on the various different other aspects that you need to put in place before you get to your 10th house, if you haven't done them properly, the world will see that. And it's very much, if you're going to stand in your power and stand in the place of the highest point of your chart where you're seen by the public, it's very much how the public see you. You want to have done the work beforehand, and you want to be doing something that you're passionate about and that really resonates with you and your chart. So that's essentially your career. And then we move on to the 11th house. The 11th house is all to do with groups, hopes and wishes fulfilled. It's a really good luck and good fortune house. It's to do with other people's children being everybody. It is to do with, it's all kind of, it's because it's to do with a lot to do with kind of groups. It's also to do with the world as a community and community service and acts of community, to kind of, if you can imagine, the first part of your house is all about me, I. We start to see that we move into relationships one-to-one. And then here we're like, it's the world. How are we in the world? How are we going to change the world? So the 11th house is all about your friends as well as kind of groups and that end as well. And then the 12th house is the house of karma. It's a karmic house. Essentially, out of all the houses, the 12th house is the one that's, for argument's sake, hidden. It's like there's a black veil over it. You can't really see what's going on in it, because a lot of it is to do with kind of psychic connection. It's to do with spiritual connection. It's to do with your connection from here to the other world. It's to do with privacy, things that you do at home that nobody else sees, things that you do in your private life that nobody else sees. So it's things which are hidden from the public that nobody else can see, only you really know about. And that's why I say also, because it's connected to the spiritual realms, because that's such a private thing as well. So that's giving you a really brief overview of the zodiac. As I said, I will go into in a different video the zodiac signs and what the different signs are and the different characteristics with them, and the planets as well. But essentially that gives you kind of a starting reference point of showing you how complex astrology is. It is not just, that piece at the back of a magazine about that big and it doesn't make any difference to you. But when you do a life path career astrology session with me, we would look at your whole chart. Now, there's different ways that I can do this. I offer several different services because not everybody wants to go into depth with the chart. Most people do. But for people who are just tipping their toes in and they're a little bit curious, I also do just a very basic overview. So if you go to deborahjkelly.com, you'll see a list of services there. And I can go into this in more in-depth analysis. But essentially what I do when a client comes to me and they're saying, look, I want to start a soul-based business. I have been working on myself for years. I've been doing all the self-development and I still feel confused. I still feel like I'm not sure what is my purpose, what is my mission. I have an idea, but I'm just really confused and I don't know what my strengths are and I don't know what my weaknesses are, and I'm into loads of different things and I just don't know where to start. And I find, again, with my clients that they're wisdom seekers. They are constantly trying to improve their lives, and they've kind of done it to the extent that they feel that the outside world can't really do a huge amount more for them, and they don't really know where to turn. And this is where astrology is just so helpful, because, as I said, even starting with the rising sign, when you start to hear somebody tell you in black and white what your traits and characteristics were, what your family is like, what your home life is like, what your siblings were like, what your children are like, what your partner is like. Your partner is generally the polar opposite to you, believe it or not. So this particular person, their rising sign is Gemini, their descendant is in Sagittarius. This person would probably dislike a lot of the Sagittarian qualities that people might have in them. So you might not be Sagittarius, you might be Virgo, and you might have Sagittarius placements in a house or with planets. And that's where it gets complex, and that's where I can kind of give you more personalized information. But, a natal chart can essentially show you who you are in the world, what emotions, the way that your emotions are and why they're affected a particular way. How you communicate best, what your siblings were like, what your family home is like, what your kids are like, what your health is like, what your daily routine and work needs to be, who your relationships you're more drawn to, what career it is that you'd be more suited to, what you need to put in place in terms of skills and talents, and also your work routine in order to make your career work and function better for you. Is there any difficult placements in your charts that you need to look out for specifically? I had a client only recently, and they had a Mars and moon placement that was actually quite difficult for them. So, and that's something that then we could work on, because quite often when we see these placements in the chart, we're living this on a daily basis. This is our natal chart, and it's just how we are. When we can learn to see that some aspect of who we are is just part of ourselves, we can drop the baggage. If you're an Aries and you're hot-headed and you jump into everything with 2 feet and think about it later, and everything is go, 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 and you're in a relationship with somebody who's a Cancerian, and they're very emotional and very kind of watery and very soft people, but on the outside they seem hard, and you're charging in over their emotions. It's very easy to see how, if we're in the wrong job, if we're in a relationship with somebody who we're kind of bashing heads with all the time, it's very easy to see that on the chart. And when you can see that, if you're an emotional person like a Cancerian would be, depending on your other placements in the chart, quite often you might feel very misunderstood because your emotions are very hidden. You tend to not be able to express them so clearly because you've got this armor over them, and it's only the select few people that you will actually allow in underneath that armor. And you can come across maybe quite cool, even though you're the most, nurturing and emotional sign. You could be very heavily misunderstood. And if you feel like that, and you're living in a world where there's lots of heavy Taurian earth energy, and then lots of Aries fire energy, and lots of other Sagittarians who are just say things as they are and whatever, you'll start to see how, if you're trying to fix what you feel is wrong with you because the other people in your life, you don't feel like you're fitting in there in some way. Astrology is amazing for being able to show you that that's who you are. You don't need to fix that. What you need to do is become aware of the fact that that's you, and then understand that your environment is the playground from which you can learn and grow from. And now that you can kind of see, well, I'm a softer person, and that's okay, I don't need to change that, then maybe it's your world that needs to change. And maybe you need to change the structures of your environment that you're in, because you've been trying to fit in to a narrative that was never your narrative. You're looking at yourself through the eyes of the world and not through your own eyes. And essentially that's what I do. And I find that when I'm working with clients, and I know for myself, when I discovered astrology and started using it for myself, it was life-changing and transformative for me. And I can see it in my clients as well, that, you know, when they finally start to realize that that's just who they are, and it's not them that need to change. They just need to change their perspective. You don't need to change your personality. You just need to change your perspective. And suddenly everything falls into place. And that which you've been battling to fix for years, all of a sudden you can lay down the baggage. It's like carrying 40 bags in each arm, you know, on each hand for years and years, and then suddenly realizing, oh, I can put them down. And then you put them down and your life gets so much better. So that's essentially what I do. Life path astrology, career astrology, and to help people course correct towards their North Star. I help women become unstuck, specifically women who are looking to set up a soul-based business, because they're generally, you know, looking to progress and move forward. They're wisdom seekers. So if you feel that any of this resonates with you, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. If you feel that any of this resonates with you, if you feel anyway curious and would like to know more, if you would like, if you'd like a chart reading based on life path career astrology, have a look at deborahjkelly.com. I'll put the links below, and you can book a session there. Basically, as I said, there's lots of different sessions. You can go for kind of a light session, which will really only give you a light overview, or you can go for a kind of more intensive session where we literally go through your entire chart. They tend to take about an hour to 2 hours, depending on the information that you're looking for. And they can be really, really transformative. I've had some clients coming to me that only need that one session, and they kind of are sorted and they go off and do their own thing. And I also very often have clients who will come for one session and they only intend to come for one session, and they realize with all the different placements in their chart that there's something more that I can help them with as well. So and then what we do is we work on things like visualization, and we do things like EFT and tapping, and different pressure points, and Reiki and meditation, and even down to herbalism. I use a lot of folk wisdom throughout my processes with my clients, depending on what their needs are, depending on what their predominant requirements are. I'll tailor each number of sessions for each client. So, you know, you might have 8 to 10 sessions, something like that. So there's lots of different ways of working. If you're curious, drop me an email, deborahjkelly@gmail.com. And I'm on Facebook as well, Deborah J. Kelly, and Instagram, Deborah J. Kelly. Okay, talk to you later. Bye.